there, Ralph Hasenhüttl, the Southampton manager, talking about whether he thinks it's right. I'm going to come to you first, because I think, but listen, we're playing in different times at the minute. It's COVID. We know that you're going to have players missing. I don't have a problem with new signings being having to play in the rescheduled games, because it's just part and parcel of football. You can't help that people are missing for COVID. Games are getting rearranged.
Yeah.
But then you start making these rules that new players can't play. That doesn't work for me.
No, I think it's absolute nonsense what he's spoken about just then. I think it opens a whole can of worms if you're to go down that route. I think you look at injuries, players that were injured back then that are not now. Are they allowed to play? Players that aren't injured that were back then, and bans, people that were banned from yellow cards, are they allowed to miss out now? And the African Cup of Nations, have they got to wait until they're back to play the rearranged? I think you're opening a whole can of worms. You know, I've just seen that Luca Dean is potentially leaving Everton. Do they get him back to play their rearranged games? I just think it's nonsense, and I think we're living in COVID times now, as you said, Daz. And absolutely. I think you just have to get on with it. If you're signing for a football club, you expect to play in every game that matters.
Crookie?
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
I was waiting for this.
Which team stands to be the biggest spenders, do you think, in terms of the number of players they're going to sign in this January transfer window? If I say to you now, who come January the 31st will have made the most additions to their squad?
You'd expect Newcastle.
Yeah.
That's who you'd expect. Or the teams down the bottom, but Newcastle will be number one.
Who was Southampton's postponed game over the New Year's weekend against?
Newcastle.
Who did you used to play for?
Yeah, Newcastle. Okay, let me ask you a question.
Your argument is nothing to do with the fact you're a former Newcastle player.
I'm not. I agree with that.
Absolutely not at all. The players for Southampton, and I listed a few, I could be wrong. Walker-Peters, Salisu, Livramento, Shea Adams, Jack Stevens, all weren't available on that game. They were all injured.
But they were registered as Southampton players. There's a big difference between being injured and being a new signing.
If they played that game when it was supposed to be, they wouldn't have been able to play because they were all injured. So if they're all fit come the rearranged game, do they all have to sit out? This is what I mean. It just opens a can of worms.
Listen, I was in that press conference this afternoon. I thought Ralph Hasenhüttl spoke very eloquently. I think he made some really good points, and they're points that have been backed up subsequently by David Moyes. We'll hear from him in the next part of the programme. I think the issue here is not a Southampton issue. It's maybe not even a Newcastle issue. It's an integrity issue in terms of the Premier League and this lack of transparency that managers keep on talking about when games are called off. Newcastle, when they got that game against Southampton postponed, and Ralph Hasenhüttl predicted it after Southampton had played West Ham in their previous match. He said, we can't call off games for injuries. They should still have enough players available. We'll never know, because Newcastle released a statement saying we won't identify the players who have tested positively for COVID. We had a situation at Manchester City the other week, the game that I commentated against Arsenal, when Phil Foden was a mysterious absentee.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say why before the game, and then Pep Guardiola confirmed afterwards he had indeed tested positive for COVID. I understand there's a private medical issue here, but I think because of the integrity and to protect the integrity of the Premier League, I think clubs need to list players who are unavailable for COVID. They need to list players who are injured, so that we don't get this suspicion that maybe teams can, and we're not saying Newcastle have, but they have the capability to play the system to their advantage, because clearly it suits Newcastle to play more games once they've got their new signings. We'll hear from Kieran Trippier later on Drive. He will be able to play against Southampton when the game is rearranged. There'll be a new centre-back coming in, certainly. There could be 4 or 5 new players. And I can understand why not just Ralph Hasenhüttl, but why David Moyes believes that is unfair and skews the integrity of the competition. Southampton, as Ralph mentioned there, played a game at Manchester United last season. They had 9 senior players available. They lost 9-0, but there was no option for them in the rule book at the time to try and call the game off.
Well, listen, what do you think? Should January signers be allowed to play in rearranged games? 03717 22 3344. You can text 81089 or tweet at talkSPORT. I mean, Crook, you do make some points, but I just think it all comes down to the times that we're in at the minute. And I understand with the COVID situation, you're going to have games called off. You're going to be missing some of your best players. It swings and roundabouts. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. But why can't the Premier League take the same hardline action that the FA have taken this weekend? Clubs have been told you have to fulfil your fixture in the FA Cup third round. If that means dipping into the under-23s, dipping into the youth academy, you have to field a team. Why should COVID be treated any differently to an injury crisis?
But that's then down to the Premier League.
I agree.
So
and that's why I said it's not a Southampton problem. It's not even a Newcastle problem. It's a Premier League problem.
But you have got an issue though with Newcastle, as you said there. They're going to be spending the money, bringing in key players. You've got a problem with them being able to play in the rearranged fixtures. You don't think they should be able to play?
I think Ralph's got a point. I think it's very difficult to implement for all the reasons that Darren Ambrose has suggested, but I think Ralph Hasenhüttl is right to raise it. And what I do know, by the way, is that Southampton haven't gone to the Premier League and said, look, we want this rule brought in, because they know they won't get the support from other clubs. I've had other clubs call me today and say they're not in favour of this. But I think he's brave for taking it on, because he knows he's going to get stick from rival supporters. They know as a club that probably the Premier League are going to frown upon it, but it's an elephant in the room that Ralph Hasenhüttl is rightly addressed.
Yeah, and listen, it's rightly so as well. Listen, to address it, because he had the 9 players, but the rules wasn't in place when he only had 9 academy players available. I think if you're going to make public who these players are, who are the judge? Who are going to be the judge of how important these players are to the team? Because
anybody with any football knowledge knows that Newcastle will be stronger come the end of the window than they are now.
If you look at Boxing Day, Crystal Palace tried to get their game called off against Spurs because they had numerous players missing out, and obviously they ended up losing. And when they started the game, they'd only make one change, and he was on the bench. So everyone was saying, well, that shouldn't be the case. Why did they try? However, the importance of Crystal Palace substitutes are always the case this season, because if you look, when they get to half-time, Crystal Palace normally come out second half flying, and they really make a point when they make their changes. At that particular occasion, all their subs weren't available. So the importance to them was their substitutes. So who's to be the judge who is important of these players if they release them publicly?